Welcome everyone. Hello guys. This is Dr. Bartolomescu, the medical futurist. And this is the first that we do here at the Medical Futurist, having an amazing guest today for you, Alvaro Goyanes from FabRx. And we will talk about 3D printing medications, one of the most exciting topics when it comes to the use of advanced technologies in medicine and healthcare. I have to be honest with you, we have never had as many technical issues as we've had today. So hopefully everything is going to work out, and I very much will need your comments to make sure that you can see us, hear us well enough. Fingers crossed, literally, that it's gonna work. We've been struggling with Zoom and OBS and all the technical difficulties around that, but the plan is to have an amazing discussion with you, having a guest finally here on the Medical Futurist channel about really an amazing technology. A short story about why I chose this topic, 3D printing medication, especially Alvaro Goyanes, for this discussion many years ago when I first came across 3D printing and as a technology that would be able to print out medications, which sounded like science fiction to me back then. Alvaro Goyanes and FabRx were quite kind enough to send me some samples, medications they printed out with a 3D printer. I'm not sure if you can see it from this distance, but these donut-shaped medications and all these different sizes and colors, they send those to me to prove that 3D printing medications is a possible technology. And now there are studies behind that, and Alvaro and his team have been at the forefront of this innovation, but I'm sure that he will talk about that as well as the company and everything. So guys, welcome to the show. Please say a few words about yourself, where you're coming from. Please tell us at least what country or city you're coming from so we know who we are talking to. Also, many of you sent in a few pretty thoughtful, pretty smart questions through the Eventbrite website. So I plan to make sure Alvaro answers all that. You know, what I do in these live channels usually is that I go through like 50, 100 questions, and I love having these discussions with you. So please make sure that we challenge Alvaro as much as possible. If you have any questions about this really exciting technology or 3D printing in general, or the regulatory part about 3D printing medications, please ask them in the comment section. I will do the same. I have a few questions on my own. But now, let me present you, hopefully, in a way that everything is working here. Alvaro Goyanes, CEO and founder from FabRx. Hi Alvaro, how are you doing today?
Hello, good afternoon. Good. Really nice to be here. Thank you for your kind introduction, and it's my pleasure to be here and with all your public, your listeners.
Of course. Thank you for taking the time to do this with us. In the meantime, guys, that's the point where I need your comments to make sure that you can hear us and see us well enough. Just please send in a thumbs up or something, and I will be so happy to be able to move forward. All good. Thank you. Thank you, Balin, for confirming that. So, Alvaro, can you please introduce yourself, how you got into 3D printing medication? Because that's not something like a young scientist is normally thinking about, right? How I could get into a field of 3D printing medications.
Yeah, so I'm a pharmacist by training. I did a pharmaceutical technology PhD in pharmaceutical technology in Spain. I'm originally from Spain. I'm actually in Spain today because we are doing some clinical trials here in Spain in a hospital. But everything started for me when I moved to London. After I finished my PhD in pharmaceutical technology, I moved to London to a research institution. In theory, I was supposed to do something completely unrelated to 3D printing, was oral vaccines for colonic delivery. Vaccines now is a hot topic, but 10 years ago when I started, it was like a bit like boring, or I don't know. And at that point in the university where I was, it was UCL, University College London. They bought a 3D printer, and this printer was in the Department of Pharmaceutics, and we were using this printer to make like small figures and Christmas decoration. And my supervisor, Professor Abdul Basit, and his colleague, Professor Simon Gaisford, they had the idea of, well, let's try to print medicines. My first thought was like, but why do you want to print medicines? You have tableting machines that you can prepare thousands of tablets per hour. Why do you want to print medicines? And the idea was like, well, it's something cool, and maybe we can come up with new ideas and think about personalization of the medicines. So this was in 2014. I started to use this chip printer that we bought from China to prepare some medicines. And starting from that, everything exploded, and 3D printing became a very hot topic. We evaluated many different 3D printing technologies, not the original one, because 3D printing is a very wide field where you can find many different technologies. And we saw many potential clinical opportunities for patients to prepare a specific type of medicines. And then we saw many potential business opportunities, and that's how we created the company FabRx, that is a spin out from the university, from UCL. And that's how I end up doing 3D printing. And now it's not only 3D printing, but all these technologies that are related to 3D printing, that is digital health, that you mentioned a lot in your channel, artificial intelligence,
Mm.
all these different technologies are combined basically to give better treatments for the patients. That's the main outcome that we want to see. Here you can see in the image some examples of different 3D printing technologies, how we create layer by layer the object, the medicine, and actually we are printing the medicine. We call them printlets, 3D
Mm.
printed tablets, and we print these printlets in hospitals or in pharmacies, and we give them straight away to the patient. That's the idea. Personalized medicine close to the patient.
Wow. And we just got a question for you. Let me share it with you in a second. It's coming from Dr. Devashish Srishtava. What about the efficacy and therapeutic index, I guess, when it comes to 3D printed medications?
Well, one of the main problems of the pharmaceuticals today is that there are reports that say that 40 to 70% of the medicines that we get from the pharmacy and give to the patients are not effective. And one of the reasons why the medicines are not effective is because we are not giving the right dose to the patients. And sometimes we give a higher dose than the required dose, and we have side effects of we provide them with lower dose, and then the medicine is not effective, and it's like not having the medicine. So with 3D printing, what we can do is to actually prepare the exact dose that the patient would need. If it's 36 milligrams, we prepare 36 milligrams. It's not 25 or 50, 36. And this is what we are proving with different clinical trials in different countries and hospitals, to prove that patients benefit from that, that you get better adherence to the treatment because you don't have these side effects, and you feel that the medicines are helping to your healthcare. That's the main point of 3D printing. That's why we focus on personalized medicine.
Okay. For the guys in the chat, I try to increase the volume, but if Alvaro, if a little bit you could get closer to the mic and speak a bit louder,
Yeah.
that would, I think, also help. And please confirm that, okay, the mic is clear and loud. Okay, there's one more question from Tanya. Let me share it with you too. What about the regulations, and what is the stage of approval from the European Medicines Agency or the Food and Drug Administration in the US?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And as 3D printing is a new technology, whenever you are trying to introduce a new technology in especially a so regulated field like pharmacy, this is a very important concern. Right now, it's possible to use a 3D printer in a hospital or in a pharmacy, and the equipment, the hardware, the printer, and the software can be considered as a tool to make compounding. Compounding is the traditional way of preparing medicines in hospitals and pharmacies, made by the pharmacists by hand, mixing products. So this is something that is legal and completely established in many different countries. In US, it's called compounding. In UK, it's called pharmaceutical specials. In other countries in Europe, is magister formulation or formulation magister. So it's possible to do that. But the reality is that we don't want to use 3D printing as an automate compounding. We want something better. We want a proper regulation for 3D printing and have, for example, printers in a hospital, and that different pharmaceutical companies prepare the inks, the materials that are going to be used in the printers, and then the final step is done in a hospital or in a pharmacy to prepare the personalized dose. For that, there is no clear regulation, but the MHRA, that is the authority for medicines regulation in UK, last year started an open question for point-of-care manufacture, including 3D printing, and the FDA followed this year. And actually, yesterday and today, there is a webinar of the FDA about distribute manufacturing and point-of-care manufacturing, and includes 3D printing. And it's about how we are going to implement these new technologies to prepare medicines, not in a centralized facility, that is the way that medicines are prepared right now, in a centralized facility, industrial facility, but thinking about having many different facilities to manufacture medicines, or maybe in the future, how we are going to prepare these personalized medicines at home, in our homes, because this is going to happen in the future. I don't know when, but I'm 100% sure that this is going to happen.
And do you have a chance to impact the way regulators are thinking about it? Do you have a chance to interact with them closely as someone, you know, working in the forefront of innovation?
Yeah, we have several meetings with the different authorities, the MHRA, the Spanish authority. Our partners in Paris are working with the French authorities. On Monday, I took part in the event with the FDA, so I have a 30 minutes presentation about what would be my vision. So I can give them my feedback, how this should be implemented, considering my knowledge about 3D printing and all the relationship that we have with hospitals. But obviously, at the end of the day, it will depend on the regulation or the regulators, how they consider that this should be implemented. And this is the main thing. But yeah, we have a clear contact with them.
And now questions are keep coming in. So one is from Saurabh Singh. How will the modus operandi evolve for 3D printing? Can the patient print their own medicine? That would be quite a regulatory hurdle, if not an ethical challenge, right?
Yeah. Well, right now, our approach is that it's a pharmacist. Pharmacist is the professional, the person that should be in charge of manufacturing and taking care of medicines. And we think that the pharmacist is the right person for that. Doesn't matter if it's in a hospital or in a pharmacy or in a facility that is close to the patient, but it's not a hospital or a pharmacy, like, I don't know, something new where you can manufacture medicines, but it's not a big facility. And our idea is that we should use this new technology, considering the use of the 3D printer with the software of the printer, and to implement quality control systems all together using these new digital technologies to 3D print the medicines, prove that the medicines are safe and are manufactured in the right way. And that's how we think it should be. And then the patient should just basically send the prescription directly to the pharmacist. The pharmacist prepare the medicine and collect the medicines the day after or 30 minutes after the prescription is sent to the pharmacy. That's how we envision. In the future, at home, that could be the future as well. And the printers the size of the printers are smaller and smaller. So I don't see any problem to implement a system where you can print at home, but what you need is to validate the system. So you need to make sure that you test this system thousands of times under different conditions with different users, and you have reliable results. You always get the right dose. And this is the critical thing that we need to prove to the authorities. And that, obviously,
That will
the
take a
first
bit of
thing is
time,
the
I
safety of
guess.
the patients.
Sure. Here's one more question from Dr. Chinder. What are the drugs you are experimenting to begin with?
Well, we are using many different types of drugs. Right now, we haven't found a drug that is not possible to print. So we are printing small molecules for different treatments like cancer, any type of disease, metabolic disease, rare disease. And we are also able to print biological drugs like antibodies or proteins.
Wow.
So that's possible to print. But to be honest, printing the drug doesn't mean that it's going to work much better. Or if, for example, if you 3D print insulin, doesn't mean that the insulin is going to absorb better than if you put it in a tablet. So you can dose it better, but you don't solve the problems of getting these biological drugs through the oral route. That the problem is that how this is absorbed. So, but it can be printed, so that's not a problem.
I guess pharma companies are not so excited about that, right? Such as 3D printing insulin and ruining their business, in fact. Wow.
Well, yeah, no, that's a lot of hype there, but you could 3D
I
print
can imagine.
insulin, but might
All
not
right.
work.
Suman Yasani has a question about one, improved quality, and two, patient-specific dosage form. What are the other features of 3D printed drugs? I guess positive features.
Well, 3D printed could be used, for example, to combine different drugs into one tablet, and at the end of the day, the patient doesn't need to have so many tablets at the end of the day. We are doing a study with some partners in Paris. Is the Institute Gustave Roussy, that is the biggest research institution for cancer in Europe, and they are using an anti-cancer drug with personalized dose combined with one drug to avoid the side effects of this anti-cancer drug. So they are able to control the dose of the anti-cancer drug and also control the dose of the drug to avoid the side effects. So this, what they are trying to prove in the clinical trial, is a long-term effect and adherence, because you are going to get less side effects and you are more willing to take this medication, especially for cancer treatments that are lasting for years. So this is one of the examples, combining drugs. It's possible to use 3D printing as well to make drug-loaded medical devices. For example, implantable devices that you put inside the body and are releasing drug in a specific manner, and you can make specific shapes, adapt this shape for the specific characteristics of the patients. So there are different advantages. It could be useful as well to speed up the development of new medicines for clinical trials. So since you can make small batches of medicines in a clinical trial, you need to change the dose for the patients sometimes every day, just to test the different doses. So you could use 3D printing to make these doses instead of using other technologies, because just with the software, you change the dose and it's much faster. So we are evaluating many advantages of 3D printing there.
Just for a quick technical check, can you guys please confirm that, Alvaro, can you please say a few words and we could test if the audio is now better while I'm showing images? Yes, in this case, I always say 1, 2, 3, 4. So hopefully that it's to check the audio. So guys, can you please confirm that the audio was better? So while Alvaro is talking about and giving you answers, I can show you some pictures he sent to me. Yes, it is. Yes, solving everything on site. Alvaro, we have many questions, so if you don't mind, I just keep rolling in because there are people.
I'm trying to
keep
be
sending in
brief,
these
but
amazing
sometimes
questions. The next one is from Tanya. But can you certify that the dosing is constant in every printlet? What are the limitations and constraints of 3D printed, I guess, medications in pharma?
Yeah, so it's possible to certify that the dose is always the same in each printlet. For that, you need to validate the process. For example, in our printers, we also include different quality control methods. For example, the simplest one is to have a balance under the printer, so you know the weight of each specific or printlet. And we are also using spectroscopic methods that allow you to quantify the amount of drug inside each printlet. So with the weight and the concentration of drug inside the printlet, you can know exactly the dose. So these are quality control methods that we think should be implemented together with 3D printing. But even without implementing these quality control methods, if you are having a very reliable printing methods, you can be sure that you are always printing the right dose, but you need to validate this method. That means like testing the method several days with different users at different times with different type of inks, just to prove that this is safe. What are the limitations of 3D printing pharma? Well, I would say the biggest limitation right now is probably the cost of the printers, because the printers are not cheap, because every pharmaceutical equipment is expensive. And right now, that could be something that for a hospital or a pharmacy to think about buying this printer right now could be something that is a limitation. But other than that, well, if I want to be picky, it's like I could say, well, the speed is compared to other methods of manufacturing is slower, but the technology is evolving very fast. And I can imagine that in 5, 10 years, the way we print medicines is going to be completely different, and we are going to be able to print medicines in a much faster way. We recently published a paper where we were printing tablets with a new technology that is called volumetric printing, just in 7 seconds. So in 7 seconds, you can get one tablet, and then in 7 other tablet. And if you print at the same time several tablets, you can get a high number of tablets. So the technology is evolving very fast.
I think it's the next question is related to that. It's coming from Viswajit Lad. As 3D printing has the potential of decentralized manufacturing like in hospitals or pharmacies, what about the supply and storage conditions of raw materials like matrix for FDM?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the supply and storage of these raw materials are the inks, let's say. The inks, depending on the type of technology that you are using, are in a different format, could be gels. In FDM, that is called fused deposition modeling, are filaments that are in a spool of filament. So obviously, we need space to store them and keep them with no humidity and everything. But it's similar to how we store medicines right now. The only difference is that, for example, instead of storing boxes of medicines with 4 or 5 different doses, like 5, 10, 15, we can store 1, 2, or 3 spools and then make whatever dose we need. So obviously, we need to be sure that the quality of the ink lasts long enough to print, and we are able to get the best materials. But this is what we need to do. In my vision, are pharmaceutical companies the companies that are going to provide these materials. I don't think the people working in hospitals and pharmacies are going to prepare these inks, because that would take time. And what makes sense is just you buy the ink from a pharmaceutical company that is the owner of the drug, and you put it in the printer and you print. That's my vision, and that's why we are trying to establish partnerships with the big pharmaceutical companies to test this approach.
Wow. Then Brian Alexander has a question. Would university students need to take classes, I guess, in the near future to learn how to print drugs?
Yes. I know in some universities that where they have printers, they have programs, and for example, for master students or undergrad, and they are very proud of showing that they have printers and how to use printers. Right now is a new technology, so there is nothing established of how to print medicines. There are many different types of softwares. There are many different types of printers. So it's not something that is standardized. My aim is to standardize this, to use the same technologies, the same type of software, that the pharmacist only needs to select the dose and the number of tablets, and then the printer does the rest. That's the future. But anyway, it's going to be necessary to understand how the printer works, and the users of the printers, that could be pharmacists, or people working in the pharmacy but without pharmacy degrees, will need to go through a training to learn how to use that. This is something that whenever we start a clinical study or a normal study with printers in hospital, we need to go there, put the printer there, explain everything, the basics, how you switch on, how you change the ink, how you print with different sizes. Yeah. So in the future, this is something that is going to be basic for any student. Yeah.
Brian also mentioned that, just like how you commented on this, standardization will be a great challenge and a lot of work, obviously.
Yeah.
Jan Sevels has this interesting question, or two actually. What about the patient acceptance of 3D printed oral dosage forms? Has there been research on that topic?
That's a good question. That's a very good question, because it doesn't matter if the technology is very fancy or it's very cool, because we can print layer by layer, and we can record that with a camera and use artificial intelligence if the patients don't like that. So when we started doing 3D printing, then back in 2016, we have this idea about do you think that the patients are going to be able to take these medicines? The tablet that you show, Bertrand, is like, would you swallow that? So that
Now?
time, yeah,
It's-
we thought, I think we need to print some medicines, but without drug, and just ask people to see if they would swallow that or not.
oh, to
So
improve some
we
trust in technology? Uh-huh.
Yeah, so we did that. We took people from our university students. We select 50 volunteers, and we ask them to swallow different tablets that we 3D printed. Obviously, I tried the tablets before just to be sure that people wouldn't die or something. Obviously not. But we asked them, can you give us your opinion about this, the shape, the different sizes? Would you swallow these capsules? Would you take these capsules? And this was basic research that we've done in 2016, and we published in 2017. Then we did something similar with children, asking about chewable formulations, tablets that you can chew it, or different formulations that dissolve in your mouth straight away. And we ask for feedback, because for us the feedback is critical. And whenever we do a study, a clinical study in a hospital, we ask them about acceptance. Normally we have like different faces, like sad faces, smiley faces, and we ask them, how do you feel taking these medicines? And they select whatever face. The reality is that the acceptability is higher, because
Okay.
for some of the medicines we can select also different flavors, so make it with the perfect flavor for them. And especially children, they love them if they are chewable tablets with like strawberry or Coke flavor, and we can make that completely personalized. Not only the dose, is also the shape, the size, the flavor.
Wow, I'm smiling because I'm 37 years old, but I can't swallow a big tablet. I always have to cut these down into two or four, like a kid, I know. But I would like to have whiskey flavored tiny tablets in the near future. I can buy that
we,
vision pretty
we
easily.
will think about
Uh,
that.
Saurabh Singh, wow, really amazing questions keep coming in. So guys, please keep on sending them. We will go through every single one of your questions. So if you just ask a question now, just give us 3 minutes and we will get there. Saurabh Singh had this question: how do we address the cyber security in case of 3D printing? I guess, someone hacking a 3D printed device and trying to print out, drugs that people would like to buy on the black market anyway.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and obviously the cybersecurity is related to the software. Obviously, we have many different I would say firewalls and ways to avoid people connecting to the printer. Normally, these printers that are connected to laptops are not connected to the normal internet, are inside of the network of the hospital, so they have an extra layer of security and are connected to the software of the hospital. But obviously, our aim is to avoid other people to just connect any laptop or any PC to the printer and start printing whatever they want. So we have different ways of avoiding that. And based on software, we have a team of software developers that are working in this specific task. And to be sure, for me, it's critical to be sure that whenever you say that you want to print, for example, 5 milligrams, you are not printing 50 milligrams. So you need to be sure that's the real risk, no? That the pharmacist thinks that is printing 5 milligrams, but somehow someone changed a parameter there and you are printing 50. Obviously, we have the software that is completely controlled, and we check who has access to the software with password control and everything to avoid this type of security. Yeah, there are some guidelines about how to implement that.
Hopefully and understandably. Brian just mentioned that we should expect various countries to make tablets with their favorite alcoholic beverages. Please tell me you are working on it already. It sounds like a good development. Of course, I'm just joking around. The next question is quite good as well. You can only expect good questions coming from the medical futurist followers. Gavin Wasserfall Smith asked this question: wouldn't there be a critical number of applicable medicines for this to be worthwhile? Have you estimated what the number would be? Like, no, the first, for those that are not familiar with it, the first drug approved by the FDA that was 3D printed was an epilepsy medication because it can dissolve in seconds the way it was 3D printed. So what the number could be here?
Yeah, so obviously the need of using 3D printing for personalized medicine for all the drugs, that's not going to happen. No, for example, if you are taking paracetamol, it doesn't matter if you are taking 500 milligrams of paracetamol or 1 gram of paracetamol, because you can have similar effect, and only if you have like very high dose you can have side effects. But there are a list of drugs that are called drugs with narrow therapeutic index, where the difference between the dose that has no effect and the dose that has toxic effect is small. For those drugs, and there are several drugs like that, that would be very useful. Or, for example, drugs for cancer that you need to control the dose. So there is a critical number of applicable medicines. And the problem right now is that there was no technology to get personalized medicines. And that's why some medicines were not reaching the market, because there was no way of getting this level of personalization. Now that we have a technology to get this level of personalization, new medicines will reach the market, and medicines that before were dosed in a conventional way could be adapted to be personalized. We have some numbers, obviously. I cannot share because it's more internal information. But if we think about all the medicines that are manufactured by compounding by hand in hospitals, those medicines are compounded by hand in hospitals because there is a need for personalization. And this need exists right now because the compounding is something that is there. And there is a percentage of medicines that are prepared by compounding. So if we start addressing the medicines that are prepared by compounding, and then we move to other potential medicines, thinking about more challenging medicines, there is a critical number of medicines, definitely.
All right. Before diving into the next question, I just wanted to show a few images. And for these next seconds, now I realize that they cannot hear you, but we will get back to that in a few seconds. This is the exact pill that you sent me a few years ago, and it just shows the layer by layer structure, the way it was 3D printed. I guess this is the Medimaker 3D printer creating these printlets. Actually, you can see these in details here. And at the end, we have, I guess these are like plastic packages, the way it's being packaged. So I just wanted to show you these few images before diving into the next question. Again, a very interesting one. Is it possible? Oh, it's coming from almost there. Bergson Fogaccia de Oliveira. Is it possible to print different textures for the tablets, like hard, soft, roughness, etc.?
Yes, since there are different technologies, it's possible to use many different type of materials. Even inside the same technology, it's possible to get different type of materials. And you can get tablets that immediately dissolve when you put them in water and disintegrate very quick. You can get tablets that are very hard, and when you swallow them, they don't dissolve in your mouth, they don't dissolve in the stomach, but maybe they dissolve and release the drug in the small intestine or in the colon. So you can get a specific type of drug release. You can get medicines that are chewable, so like gummy formulations with the drug inside, with different flavors. That's great for children, for example, and we will think about this whiskey idea as well. But yeah, it's one of the advantages of this as well is the possibility of getting different textures or different ways of making the tablets.
Absolutely, sure. Thank you. Now, Havaida had this question. What about temperature sensitive medications? Is there a consideration for temperature settings?
Yeah, well, I would say in 2017, 2018, or 5 or 6 years ago, temperature was the critical parameter because in some of the technologies like FDN, FDN is fused deposition modeling, we make some filaments and then this filament, we put it in the printer and the printer, we print this filament and the technology basically melts the filament to create layer by layer the object. At that point, we were using some materials that were melting at 200 degrees. What happens if you use a drug that degrades at 150 and you are printing at 200 degrees? Well, you don't have drug after printing, or most of the drug is going to be degraded. Right now, the research moved a lot. There are several groups evaluating many different types of materials and excipients, and right now it's possible to print at very low temperatures. With FDM, I think it's possible to print even at 60 degrees, so we can print medicines at 60 degrees. There are other technologies that do not require temperature, so even if you have a temperature-sensitive medicine, a thermolabile drug, that's not a problem. You can just select the right materials to print at low temperature, and that's not a problem. But this was a big problem like 5 years ago. That's why I'm very optimistic about the future, because when I started, I was going to a conference and people were saying, oh, but the loading, the drug that you are able to put inside the tablet is very low. You are only able to put 10 milligrams. And that was true. Like 8 years ago, we were putting 10 milligrams. But now we are able to put much higher drug loading, like 200, 600 milligrams. Then we have the problem with the temperature because we couldn't print at low temperature. But other people and researchers around the world started doing research and printed at low temperature. So all the problems that we face, it's important that we identify them and then we try to overcome them. And this is going very fast because considering that in 10 years we moved from the lab to the hospital, when everybody was saying it's not going to be possible to print in a hospital. You are not going to be able to put a printer in a hospital. There are no pharmaceutical printers. There is no software. Well, let's do it then. And that's my vision.
I get,
Let's do it.
you know, it always happens with really advanced technologies, and it's so great to hear these stories from you, you know, from the forefront of that technology. And I hope that you're enjoying the questions so far. We have a few more to go in the next like 20 minutes or so.
I like that. I
And
like
if you
the
could give it
challenge.
like we have about 15 questions, you know, lined up. Yeah, no question about that. And I really want to have a quick fun exercise with you at the very end, a bit futuristic exercise. So if you could like give like a half a minute answer for each, then we can go through each. And so now jump right into it. The first is, what is the cost of manufacturing one tablet without considering the active ingredient? That's coming from Francisco Ramirez.
Okay, we never calculated the cost because for that you need to take into account the cost of the printer, and it depends on the number of times you print. We say that the cost is similar to the cost of compounding. Why? Because compounding, you need a person preparing the medication. With 3D printing, you are having a printer printing the medication, and that person could do something else. So it's more expensive than conventional manufacturing, but it's cheaper or similar to the compounding.
Okay, that's actually very new information even to me, and I've been writing about 3D printed medications. A good, actually, this is the question I wanted to ask you, but Visvajit Lad asked it before me. Is what is the scope of AI in 3D printing medications?
Okay, we use AI and we publish some articles about how we can use artificial intelligence to predict the best composition to get a specific type of formulations. So which excipients we could use to print properly the medications. And we published a couple of articles about this. And we have an online application, an online software that everybody can use that is called Medicine, is M3DI Scene, like scene. So That's one of the approaches. I think artificial intelligence is going to be involved in the whole process, like suggesting the best dose, for example, for the patient. So the doctors can give actually the best dose based on predictions with artificial intelligence, managing the whole system, how each person reacts or the answer for different medications. I think AI is the future as well.
Okay. Tanya was the question. So how is your printer applied in hospitals right now? Is it employed for research programs or everyday use?
It's mainly for clinical applications, but research
Mm-hmm.
applications. So it's not
Okay.
everyday use because right now there are no pharmaceutical companies selling the inks. It's something that we need to establish these agreements
Okay.
in the future. So the pharmacists prepare the medication, the ink in the hospital using the printer. So they prepare the ink and then they use the printer to print the final dosage forms. We are doing clinical trials. The number of
Okay.
patients involved in clinical trials goes from 4 or 10 in some studies to 200 in other studies, but it's just basically proving that the technology works and getting the technology ready and mature enough for the everyday
Wow.
use.
It's so good to hear that. Do you have an estimation when the first clinical trials about 3D printed medications would come out? Because that would be, quite the breakthrough or the threshold for people in the industry accepting the technology.
Yeah, I mean, we did a very small clinical study with 4 patients for a rare disease back in 2019. That was the first time we put a printer in the hospital, but obviously it was a very small study. Right now,
Mm-hmm.
we are making these studies bigger, and hopefully, in 1 or 2 years, we will have the first results. I know that the results are positive because I know the how the clinical trials are going. But
Mm-hmm.
then when you publish the article and you get all the data together and it goes through the review process,
So it's like
it takes,
1, 2 years from now, right?
yeah,
Approximately.
maybe
Okay.
in 1 year, maybe next year we have some results, but probably definitely in 2 years we will have.
Sure, sure. Okay. Saurabh Singh, how does one address different time release formulation with 3D printing?
Well, the how you get different time release, it will depend on the materials that you are using. If you are
Mm-hmm.
using excipients that dissolve immediately, you are going to get immediate release formulations. If you are using materials that dissolve a specific pH in the gastrointestinal tract, the formulation is going to release the drug at that pH, maybe in the stomach, maybe in the small intestine, or in the colon. Or if you have a formulation that is releasing in a controlled way, but always the same way, but everything depends on the materials that you are using.
Okay. Dr. Chinder asked, have you tried medical transdermal patches?
Uh, I personally never tried transdermal patches using 3D printing. I know other researchers have done that. Basically, you use 3D printing to create one layer or 2 layers, and it's possible and it works. I know also that you can use 3D printers to make micro needles. So these micro needles are able to cross the skin barrier and release the medicine in a more effective way. So that's done. But
Mm-hmm.
me personally, I've never done it.
Okay, okay. Bergson Fogaccia de Oliveira has one part of the question, a huge comment. How long do you think will be needed to achieve massive, I guess, mass use of 3D printers?
Yeah, well, that's something that I cannot predict. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
the interest of people or the number of hospitals that contact us to get our equipment and to discuss the possibility of getting studies together, the prepare studies together, is increasing. I think 3D printing is definitely a hot topic, and the interest is growing and growing every year. But I don't really know when we can consider this like mass use. Maybe
Sure,
it's not
sure.
going to be mass use for in terms of most of the drugs, but maybe
Mm-hmm.
could be mass use if we have like 60 or 70% of the hospitals having a printer and preparing part of the medication. That I would consider that like a mass use.
I always, I've always been thinking about 3D printed medications like I've been thinking about digital pills. that not every medication will have a microchip included, but in certain niche areas like mental health conditions, elderly patients with low levels of compliance, in those cases, it can be very efficient. So I guess the same niche areas should be found for hospitals to focus on, like personalized dosages or customized shapes that children want to take, because the low levels of compliance, is quite a challenge for them. So Adia Shimendel asked this question: will 3D printed drugs be more potent than what is created now? Will they last the 3 years it takes to get to Mars? It's quite a random second question.
Well, I think the 3D printed drugs, the aim is not to make them more potent. It is possible that depending on the materials that you are using, the excipients that you are using, you make the drug more, increase the bioavailability, so the drug is absorbed better, but it does not because of the use of 3D printing, that's because of the materials. But our aim is not to make it more potent. Our aim is to get it better. I really like the idea about Mars, because we published an article about the use of how we are going to make medicines in the space. And basically what we were saying is that in the future, we are not going to have a tableting machine and powder floating around in the space to make tablets. So we need to find new ways of making medicines, and we propose the use of 3D printing and having 3D printers. Right now in the International Space Station, there are 3D printers. So I imagine that we will have 3D printers in Mars or in these starships that go to Mars. I imagine 3D printing is going to be involved in the future of space exploration for printing medicines. I don't know if the aim is going to make some ink that is going to last 3 years, or there are new technologies that are coming out that the aim is to prepare the drug in situ. So through chemical reactions, for example, it's called computing. You are combining different materials and you get the drug. This drug is as a powder. Obviously, you need to mix with the excipients and then you can give it to the person. So you can have this technology to create the drug and then 3D printing to make the final dosage form. I imagine something like that in the future, and we will need something like that because we cannot send medicines to the space because the harsh conditions of the space degrade the medicines very quick.
Wow, it's good to know. And maybe the last question before I dive into the fun exercise I designed for you is here, coming from Saurabh Singh. Does the FDA consider 3D printing medications as a software, as a medical device? Does it have to be approved by the FDA? No.
No. There is no clear. Well, as I mentioned, the FDA opened the conversation recently about distributed manufacture and point of care manufacture. My interaction with the FDA, considering if the printer or the software could be considered a medical device, the short answer is no, because basically it's just equipment to make medicines, and then we have the medicine. So it should be considered as equipment to make medicines, not as a medical device. But maybe that would change in the future.
Alvaro, kudos to you for going through all these really thoughtful, I think, really smart questions and giving us so much information to think about. I've learned a lot, but before allowing you to leave the channel, I would like to ask you, as any guest on this show, on the Medical Futurist channels, to do one fun exercise with me. I call it the 3 scenarios exercise, and I think it's very simple. I want to create 3 near-term futuristic visions with you. In one futuristic vision, everything you have been working on, everything about the 3D printed medications field would be like a fairy tale. Everything becomes real, all the medical technological breakthroughs take place, all the regulations take place in time, everything is wonderful like in a fairy tale. And using that knowledge or idea, let's describe what healthcare would look like focusing on 3D printing medications. The second scenario will be an optimistic one, that most of the things you have been working on will become real, most of the breakthroughs take place, and so on. And the last one will be a pessimistic, where everything goes berserk and the whole technology becomes like an ethical nightmare. Sin, I guess you wouldn't like to to design that last one, but believe me, designing these three scenarios, these three visions, help people better understand what they can expect from the next few years about this technology in a sense. So let's start with I think the easiest one, the fairy tale. Everything works on your advantage. Everything that you want to see to become real, every medical breakthrough, every regulation, every investment, everything takes place. Let's imagine a healthcare process using a 3D printer like 6-7 years from now.
Well, maybe longer than 6 years, but
okay, let's make it 10. Everything became real that you have been dreaming about.
Okay, so I would imagine a scenario where when we are a patient, we know that something goes wrong with our health, either because we feel bad or we have a blood test analysis that says that something is wrong, or we have a wearable device that says that something is wrong. In the future, wearables devices are going to be able to measure many parameters that now we are not able to measure. So in that case, if that can be cured taking medicines, we are going to get the prescription to get the personalized medicine. So this prescription is going to be sent straight away to the pharmacy. And in the pharmacy, they are going to make the medication, and this medication is going to be delivered to your house next day or the afternoon, in the same way Amazon is delivering everything in 24 hours. So maybe you don't need to go to the pharmacy, or maybe for some medicines that you are taking continuously the medicine, you have a small device at home that is able to make the tablets for you. And depending on how you feel each day, or the feedback from the wearable device, for example, for pressure, if you have high blood pressure one day, another day is normal. So the medicines for blood pressure could change every day, and you could get every morning the medicine that you need to take that for that date based on the results of the day before. That's how I envision the future. It's a bit optimistic, obviously, but
it's a fairy tale scenario, so let's be very much optimistic.
Yeah,
and I hope you don't mind, the whiskey flavor and all these will also be available, right, on like purple.
Obviously.
Okay.
So
okay, second scenario,
basically
optimistic vision. Okay, most breakthroughs take place, not everything you dreamed about like in the first one, but the field is getting there. There's a good progress, a healthy kind of evolution. What happens in 5 to 10 years? Let's use the same vision and change it back to a more scientifically realistic scenario.
Yeah. So obviously, I don't think we are going to print at homes. In this second scenario, I think medication is going to be prepared in hospitals, or maybe in some distribution centers, but not
or pharmacies.
Medicines are not going to be prepared, for example, for the whole Europe in France, no, and then distribute. Okay. No, we are going to have closer manufacturing points, closer to the patient. And we are going to have quicker access to these specific medicines. I think the medicine is going to be personalized as well for some medicines, not for others. And we are going to print medicines personalized. And obviously, we will need to go to the pharmacy. I don't think for legal considerations in many countries, it's not possible to deliver medicines by post. For example, in Spain, you cannot send medicines by post. So okay, I don't think that's going to change.
That in 5 to 10 years, at least they would solve this not so state-of-the-art regulatory issue, right?
I don't know.
Okay.
But anyway, if you have to go to the pharmacy, you have a pharmacy always 10 minutes away, or okay, you can go and collect that medicine for your nearest pharmacist, and the medicine is going to be with your name. You give your healthcare card to the pharmacist, and the pharmacist gives you the medicine with your name. No errors. Okay. You avoid medication errors, and that's personalized.
Okay. Last, pessimistic vision. Tell me a vision, a scenario through which something goes berserk with 3D printed medications.
Well, the pessimistic vision is that we don't manage to get 3D printing for personalized medicine because the authorities say, well, this is too complex to regulate that, and we are used to approve, for example, specific doses. And this concept about you getting whatever dose you want, we don't know how to approve that. And this is too novel, so we are not going to do that. And you can use 3D printing as a new technology to make medicines. In the same way you mentioned Spritam from Aprecia, that is a company in US. They are using 3D printing to make medicines. It's approved by the FDA, but it's not personalized medicine. It's great, it's fantastic because they were the first using 3D printing to make medicines, put them in the market, and get regulatory approval from the FDA. That's not easy for a new technology.
Okay.
But obviously, it's not personalized. It's an alternative way of getting medicines. And for some medicines, it's better to make it in that way. So I would say the worst scenario is a scenario where 3D printing is like another technology to make medicines, but we cannot make personalized medicines because from a regulatory point of view, it's not allowed.
I think maybe you don't watch enough dystopic science fiction movies and don't read those books, but like I can tell you much more pessimistic scenarios about this technology, like the black market using 3D printers, especially for making drugs like cocaine, specifically with 3D printers in designer drugs and all this. So I can come up with really bad stuff about the near future. Maybe I watch too much of these dystopic scenarios. So maybe just one last question, because it's an amazing question from Ricky T on the channel. Sorry for a late question, but can you discuss what are the skills or expertise to get into this field?
Right now, I think to work in this field, I would say that if you are a pharmacist, you are in a better place because I think pharmacists are going to be involved in that. But maybe it's not necessary if you are if you want to work in this field and you are, I don't know, mechanical or electrical engineer in the development of new printers, software engineer in the development of software. So in our company, we have many different type of profiles. I would say as a pharmacist, if you are a pharmacist,